Inspirational, powerfully refining, and unapologetically controversial. Conversations with the Royal Empress. The entire world knows the secret of who you are. Now is the time to step into your queendom and become the Royal Empress that you're meant to be. One woman at a time. Conversations with the Royal Empress. Now Akila, she's the analytical Empress. Akima, she's the Empress that will challenge you. And Lakashay Nadira, she's the Empress who tells it like it is. Now, straighten up your crown and be elevated through conversations. Conversations with the Royal Empress.
Welcome to Conversations with the Royal Empress. I am Dr. Hakima, and joining me is my sister from another mother and fellow co-host Akila. Today we are joined by guest co-host Andrea Little Mason, aka Dr. Doula. There has been this growing movement in this country where women are being asked to give up their wombs, i.e., meaning donated, etc. But do we really understand the importance and spiritual connection of our womb? Today's topic, the importance of the womb, and should I donate it to a woman in need?
This is really going to be an interesting topic, but I think before we ask you any questions, Andrea, we should at least read your bio and let people know who you are.
Okay.
Andrea Little Mason, EDD, affectionately known as Dr. Doula, is an educator, scholar, researcher, advocate, and legacy builder who uses her expertise to promote resourcefulness in families during the childbearing years. As an influencer and thought leader in birth culture, she focuses on birth mentoring through Sankofa Birth Ambassadors while encouraging African American women to reclaim their birthrights by embracing the best of what African American birth, her story, has to offer, and helping build connections through the Africa to the Diaspora Birth and Postpartum Project. She has also established Daughters of the African Diaspora Alliance to bring together and showcase women of the African diaspora who are working to preserve, protect, and promote sacred practices. Dr. Doula uses opportunities for international travel and speaking to expand her global knowledge of Indigenous women's birth practices and share those insights with others. Girl.
Hey.
That is Dr. Doula.
Hey. Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to be here to talk with you all about this topic. Very interesting.
We appreciate you being here. And I know you probably have so much to say about what we're discussing and why is there this big push, you think, for women to let go of something so sacred as our wombs?
You know, I think that at the core of things, the efforts that women have made to, find their freedom, those who have been very strong in certain movements, empowering women, often they're choosing to become more like men. So things like your menstrual cycle is a nuisance. It's a nuisance. It's a bother. And those male-dominated spaces don't always accommodate a menstrual cycle. They don't accommodate the challenges that women might deal with. They don't even accommodate birth or pregnancy or anything like that. And so I think that along the way, there's just been a devaluing of the womb, of the uterus, of what that brings to our lives. Aside from the fact that people aren't even thinking about the physical challenges that come with removing your womb as well.
Like early menopause.
Exactly. with the if they leave the ovaries intact, which they usually do, unless there's a reason to remove the ovaries, then the women technically don't go into early menopause. But there are different other things that happen. For example, the support of the pelvic floor. They can either remove, they can do a total hysterectomy where they take, now this is not for the transplant, but this is just in general, because I'm amazed that there are women that try to hold on to their uterus. It's like, I really want my uterus, I want my uterus. And there are people saying, I'll let it go. And just the whole thought of letting go of a healthy organ, I think people don't really think about it. When they do that, if you have a total hysterectomy, that's removal of the uterus, the ovaries, as well as the cervix. But then there are times where the cervix is left. There are times when the cervix and the uterus is removed. If they remove the ovaries, then you're going to go into menopause. And they already know that removing your ovaries causes some kind of cardiac problems. The uterus and the female reproductive organs are not just for baby making. They are not just for that. They found there's a connection between your uterus and brain function with women. So there are so many reasons, even before we get to the spiritual context of it, there's so many physical reasons. When you remove the uterus and the cervix, they have to find a place to reconnect the vagina, the lead that leads up to the cervix. They have to find a place to connect it. And then there are women that deal with prolapse. So now bladder or rectum, things begin to shift and move in that space that's left. So that's just without even thinking about, I want to donate my uterus. That's just caring about having a uterus in the first place. There's some women that have no complications. There are a lot of women that do.
That was very interesting. That blew me away when you said you talked about the womb and how it's connected to various parts of the body. That blew me away. But it just made me think about, I read something about the womb. I think the site is called Sacred Womb, and they were talking about how the womb is the seat of power for the woman. And it just, when you said that, it just made me say, dang, I never thought about removal of my uterus and how that would affect different parts of my body. That was just a very profound statement, and really coming to a realization or the actualization of how powerful the womb is and how so connected to the rest of the body that it is.
I mean, the ovaries, they have something to do with the actual neural structure in our brain. They're just now starting to investigate how the womb is connected to the brain. They're like, wait. We think this might be connected to brain function. This is still very new research. But many of us, when we're only walking in a space where we see the challenges of, my cycle is this long and it's that long. And the whole goal of everything from the time you're in adolescence to an adult, a woman about to go into menopause is, look, just, try to deal with it. Try to deal with, being a woman. It's, try to deal with that. And then I've heard doctors and women that said, they were like, if you, have you had babies? I had my own situation once, and they were like, how many kids you got? I'm like, 4. Oh, that's great. You're not looking to have any more, are you? Yeah, I can schedule you for not next month. I'm booked. I'm booked next month.
Wow.
But I can get you in May. I was like, oh my goodness, it's a real thing. Medical science does not see a need for the uterus outside of carrying babies. Period. They consider the womb that is not pregnant, the uterus that is not housing a baby, to be a dormant womb. It is a dormant, as if it has no function. So then if you're not carrying a baby, it's dormant. That's what the medical profession sees. That's how they view that.
Do you think that's just a Western medicine philosophy?
I absolutely believe it's a
Okay.
Western medicine philosophy. You know, it just knowing what I know about how men were very dominant in the whole maternity care system and how it's been set up and what it does. I'm very confident that it is a Western mentality about it. And I always tell people, we have to, well, I don't tell people what they have to do, but I encourage people to consider things from a more holistic perspective. Like I said, we haven't even started talking about spiritual context yet, but the fact that, there are simple things like teas and other herbs and things that can help us regulate this organ in the body that is so powerful. And we're just like, I don't want to drink a tea. Yeah, I don't need this thing. I don't need it. And in fact, when I asked the question, I saw an article that was talking about the transplant. There were some very well thought out answers. When I asked the question on my Facebook page, would you consider donating your womb? There were some that were very thoughtful. And like, my sister was born with this condition. I would gladly give her my womb. They were very thoughtful, maybe 2 or 3, but there were a lot of people saying they can have it. They can have it. Take it. And I was like, I was just in shock.
Have disconnected
Yeah.
from their
Yeah.
from their womb, and they don't even understand. It's interesting that someone would say, "Oh, even in the example of saying that I will give it to my sister. Why not just carry the baby for yourself?"
I was
And
thinking about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
so
that's too much work now. That's a lot of work now.
it is, but there's a reality, um, particularly, because I do a lot of adoption work. So there's a reality that there are many women who cannot carry children for whatever reason. And so they
Mm-hmm.
adopt, but there's this thing called assisted reproductive technology and
Exactly.
assisted reproductive therapies. So there are other ways. I mean, we talk about the in vitro, we talk about surrogacy and all of these things. So it would only make sense to me that why should I donate my womb when you can actually carry a baby for someone? We act as if, are they just pushing surrogate mothers out the way? And you know what I mean? So it makes no sense to me. And there was I can't remember the article now, but there was someone who had the transplant, and then they didn't carry the baby to term. But then it's my understanding that somewhere they finally had a successful birth from the uterus transplant. But I believe it's only been one.
Mm-hmm. That's what I researched as well.
I believe the first country that did it was Sweden. And so Sweden did it. I think they had how many, 7 or 8 attempts, maybe 3 or 4 successes or something like that. Here, there's only been 1 success out of the 4 attempts, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, 4 attempts.
So,
okay.
yeah, 4 attempts. But that's why you don't see as much about it, because I think, and the thing about it is, I wondered that too about the surrogacy. Like, why in the world wouldn't I used to honestly think that someone that was willing to carry a baby for them, that was a huge sacrifice. I was like, what? And I was meeting all these women. They were like, oh, I've carried 2 babies for 2 different families. What? And I'm like, how do you explain it to your kids? How do you explain it, whatever? And they explain, to their children that this family's not able to have their own baby, and mommy can, and we're going to take care of their baby in my belly, and then we're going to give them the baby. And that's how they explain it to their children. But the thing with the transplant, I mean, of course, you also, you're basically saying with the transplant, you're basically saying that there will be, the person will donate their uterus. So they have the hysterectomy pretty much, but it's more delicate because they want to preserve all the vessels and everything. And then after that, the person will attempt to have babies with the uterus. Like I said, in this country, I believe it's only one out of 4 that has worked. But they only leave the uterus in the mother for 1 or 2 pregnancies, and then they remove it. So she doesn't keep it for life. She uses it to have the babies, and then it's removed. That's a lot. And they do that because of the anti-organ rejection drugs and stuff like that. They say they don't want they don't want the person to have to stay on that drug forever. I do wonder what kind of research they did, however, about a person carrying a baby with those drugs and what that means.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's been enough research in order to say how that affects the baby. Knowing that something like that will pass through the baby's bloodstream and things like that. I don't think I heard from people when I posed the question that were very heartfelt, and they were like, people want to know what it means to have a baby. But I go back to what we talked about before, or mentioned before, about just the value of the womb. And so there's this space in my mind. I think, yes, there are some people that are born without the ability to birth. Some born without uteri, they don't have a uterus. But then there's also in my mind that this point of, it's amazing how sometimes, not always, sometimes people don't care about, where are the rites of passages that happen for our young girls that teaches them how to know their wombs, how to take care of their wombs? Where are those things? We start them out in life saying, do what you want, girl, it's your body, you do what you want to do. And then by the time things go further along, there's so many more issues with fertility now than there ever were. And I just don't believe that it's not related to anything. I just can't.
I'm floored by it. Like you said, the womb has more to offer besides just physical reproduction. All in what you said, just the idea of carrying someone else's child or whatever, or just giving up the uterus so that someone else can use it. But we understand that the womb, that's the seat of our emotions. That's like our own personal individual power. That's where our pain goes. How can you remove the uterus, remove our womb, and that not still be attached to it? That's my question. What are your concerns on that?
I know women, because besides C-sections, hysterectomies, the removal of the uterus, is the most performed surgery on women. So first is C-sections, second is hysterectomies. And only about 1/3 of women, if I'm not mistaken, I think I got it right, only about 1/3 of women, or 1 in 3 women, will experience a hysterectomy before they turn 60. And half of those are like before they're 50. There is no real expectation that we will survive into our elder years with a uterus. There is no expectation of that. There is no expectation that there is no thought that the uterus is important. And it really, I really believe that it is because we have adopted, as Black women, I will say, because that's what I deal with, that we've adopted the thought process, the way of thinking about our bodies, the way of thinking about our wombs. I think of the womb from a very spiritual place. But, I'm noticing more and more that people are very detached from that, do not think about the womb in the sense of like, oh, it's important, or it's the seat of my emotions, or, or anything like that. It's amazing. No, I ask questions a lot. And so I was like, so what would you tell a woman who is over 40? It was a question about being over 40 and wanting to have a baby. And how would you tell them to prepare? Because I know I have a lot of birth workers on my Facebook friends. You know how many people didn't say, take this vitamin, take that? Most of them said, tell her to deal with all of her emotional baggage. Tell her to deal with tell her to do a cleanse and deal with her emotions. And I started asking them, why are you telling her to deal with these emotions? So many recognize the connection between the emotions that we feel and so many womb issues that we have. There is a connection between who we are, and people do not. So I'll say this, because whenever you start talking about like, oh, the connection between the women, well, what about the women that had hysterectomies? Are you saying they're not fully women? Well, what about the people that this, that, or the other? It always comes back as, well, you're not really being mindful of those who were born without a uterus. What are you saying? That she's not a woman? Are you saying? I'm not saying any of that. I am literally just speaking about the connection of the womb to the woman. That is not the same thing as saying what someone is not or does not or anything, because I know women who've had hysterectomies that still feel like almost as if there's still a wound there. They talk about almost like people say a phantom limb when it's been amputated. There are women I know that say, I still feel things. And I'm like, what am I feeling? My womb is gone. Why am I feeling these things? So, my personal thought is that, if we really care about the womb, then we should start way before we want a baby. Okay, I traveled, I've been around the world. Now I want a baby. I've done everything I wanted to do. Now I want a child. They say that, birth control does not affect pregnancy. Yeah, I'm not here to refute that. I'm not a medical doctor. What I do know is that birth control is intended to prevent ovulation, and or birth control is intended to make the mucus in the cervix thicker so that the sperm cannot get there, and or birth control is intended to prevent implantation of a fertilized egg. And then a lot of them do it hormonally. So the hormones are like, oh, we're going to prevent this from happening. We're going to amp up this so that doesn't happen. We'll make it so the egg can't implant. We'll make it so you don't, I don't believe you can do that for years and then be like shocked. Well, they said there was no side effects to this. I just think that we should think more, like use more of our intuition. How can you do that for years and years? But I can't say that it influences infertility or the need, because medical profession does not say that it does. So, whatever.
Because we have to look at prior to birth control. What were they doing?
Exactly.
They knew how to,
exactly.
They knew how to prevent pregnancy. There's a natural spacing. Even with, and that doesn't mean that it can't happen, but even breastfeeding and all of that, there are still natural ways of spacing your children. I can tell you, my grandmother she gave birth to 10 children, and she nursed them all. They're all a year and a half to 2 years apart. So how did she not get pregnant? Because she didn't, you know what I mean? And so you see that, you look at that and you'll see that in families where they're 2.5 years apart. I remember my gynecologist told me that 2.5 years is the proper spacing for children. He never once tried to just put me on birth control or anything like that. But then I think we've had this discussion before. My doctor is also African. So his whole mindset was completely different. And even though I had a C-section, it was not his first thing to do. It was, he told me, we had a conversation. He said, C-sections make me itch. And if I have to cut you believe me, it will be a last resort.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of doctors who are telling their patients that.
Not at all. No.
That's
So,
true.
But again, different mindset, coming from a different upbringing, a different culture,
Different culture.
and all of that, I think has a lot to do with it. So, but we have bought into European ideas in ways. I mean, we've been made to hate our menstrual cycles.
Exactly.
And because we hate them, we have this relationship with our wombs that's adversarial.
And can I tell you that we just underestimate. I mean, I was literally thinking about it. When a woman is pregnant, all of a sudden she's like touching her belly. She's like, here, listen, touch, right?
Right.
When you touch, feel that. Did you feel the kick? Did you feel this? When do we spend time adoring our wombs outside of that time?
Ooh.
I mean, literally, like, when do we, we sit, the baby kicking, and we're like, look at the video of the baby kicking, and we'll push right there. But we don't spend most of our lives pregnant. When do we show appreciation that as women we have been giving, as wombmen, we've been given this ability to show evidence of our creativity. We have this evidence monthly, that's evidence of my creativity. Maybe it'll never be used for that, but there's evidence of it. And to think, I forgot what they technically call it, but I remember some years ago I went somewhere and they were talking about how you speak to water, and that, speak to, how water holds memory, right? Water holds memory. And I remember when I really in my mind just accepted that, us being 65, 70% water, just like we speak to our children, and the way we speak to our children has an impact on who they are and is imprinting on them. When we are constantly talking about ourselves, we always say, speak life to yourself. Okay, fine, speak life to yourself. Well, what about your womb? What about that? What about, like, oh yes, I have started doing that. Thank you for all that you get. Thank you. And touching and womb massage, massaging our own wombs. Most of the time we don't think about it unless it's starting to hurt. It's like, oh girl, I can't stand it. Give me some Motrin. Give me a heating pad. But even with the heating pad, it's for us. It's not even like an energy of like soothing or figuring out or anything. We can hear someone say, there's a tea that can assist you with that. There's a tea that can help regulate things for you. A tea. I don't know if I trust that tea, but let somebody tell you something that I can give you something to help you get rid of them cramps. Girl, anything. Anything.
You ain't lying.
Anything. But if they say, well, if you drink this nettle tea, if you drink this like 7 days or so before your cycle come, when your cycle come, if they try to talk to you about, this is how you do your womb, this is how we care for our womb, this is how our ancient mothers cared for our womb. They drunk certain teas every now and then. They did this. When people start, oh, that's too much. I just take it. I don't care, take it. I ain't have no more kids. That's how we get to take it without thinking about everything.
And then what about the side effects of the medication?
Girl.
Ibuprofen. Ibuprofen has absolutely been linked to a weakening of the heart, and it leads to heart attacks. That's one of the
well.
You can look that up.
Yes. As well as ulcers.
Right.
That don't heal as well as, like, if you have this kind of ulcer. No, it literally eats at that lining of your stomach. These medications have side effects, and we would rather do that and care for ourselves in that way. And I'm not even sitting up here saying never take of this. No, that's not what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm saying our go-to first line of defense is pass me my medicine. Give me my.
Yep.
Girl, oh my gosh. But let someone try to reestablish this relationship between you and your womb. Girl, what? You do that? I do. I actually do. Or like, let them try to talk to you about planning, like you talked about before, Keela. Like, let's plan. Do you know when your cycle comes? Have you, do you know? Okay, well, this is how you can. What? So wait. So I gotta count. What?
And that was my exact words. I said, hey, I got pregnant off that method because I wasn't doing right. My second daughter came from that. You talking about the rhythm method? Is that
Yeah.
what you're talking about? Girl, I screwed that all up. I ended up being pregnant off of that. And then asking a dumb question like, "How this happen?" And my mom was like, "You know how that happened." So it's like, yeah, you're right. It's so foreign to us. The ancient ways are so foreign to us.
And that's
But
amazing.
they're remnants. But they're remnants. There are remnants around, and that's what I think is so important, is that they're remnants of it. Like Akila talks about certain things. I'm like, you do that? You said it, really? You what?
Yeah. I mean, it's real. And I mean, even the counting, like people would laugh at me, but I'm like, I would kind of build my life in a way around my cycle. And because I counted, because I knew when, I mean, now it's not like clockwork anymore, but
Right?
And so, I mean, like literally, I would plan things based on when my cycle was going to come. If I knew my cycle was going to be here, then it's like certain things I'm not going to do work wise because I know that I need to rest. And so, like, some of us look at it like, oh my God, it's such an inconvenience. And I mean, I used to have horrible cramps and all of those things, but I also started to understand that in a way, it is a rest period for you.
It is.
It's a time for you to say, okay, this happens to me. It's okay to be still. It's okay to be quiet. It's okay to be pampered. It's okay to do all of this stuff. And I'm good with that. And so I don't even, because people try to tell you, girl, it's just your period. Okay. It's not.
You know what? That would have been my words. Girl, get over it.
I mean, I've had people tell me that, girl, please, that's just, you got to keep on pushing. And that's what I don't understand. How sacred. What about, is it a Bible story? I'm trying to remember the red tent.
Yes.
When the women would go in the tent when they were ministrating.
Yes.
So, it's like, we
And
don't.
what's funny about that? I was mentioning that to somebody, and they were saying it's amazing how everything has, even when we don't have to put it in a male dominated perspective, we will. And so the women like, that was the men getting it. It would say the passage would talk about, I think it was talking about after birth or something, but either way, the passages would always talk about unclean.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were so many women that could not get past the word unclean. They were like, I'm not looking at this. Why is the woman unclean? I said, okay, see if you can kind of get past that for a minute to see that there was actually there was something that was done. I understand that that's a bit of a throw off, but can you get past that? And many of them cannot. So the whole notion of resting, of being good to yourself, of, giving yourself like a thank you period. It's like, ooh, thank you. That was another opportunity. We just don't. But okay, so then there's also this part of me that I deal with people on my timeline, and there are all these conspiracy theories. They're like, I mean, okay. I ain't trying to bring the conspiracy to y'all, but at the Royal Empress, but 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 there are people that look and they say, wait a minute, so this surgery is so far out of most people's reach. This is something that wealthy people could do and not others, at this junction. This is like, I think almost 100,000, some ridiculous number, thousands of dollars that no insurance company would pay for. So the women, it's in trial form right now, but It would not be like a kidney transplant or something like that. This is totally elective and would totally be for the most elitist people. Now, whenever you start talking about stuff like that, then people start talking about conspiracies. And they start saying, so only people who could afford to have this done would have it done. And then they start looking at all of the things that have historically been done with eugenics, with, preserving one race of people and not another. And knowing already that, Black women are very unique. Even our breast milk looks different from other people's milk. So imagine, just throwing out what I heard in the internet streets.
I like that, internet
Imagine,
streets.
okay? Imagine those who, and I'm not saying everyone feels entitled, but if you wanted this surgery, you'd have to be entitled. I want a baby, and I don't just want a baby. I want to feel the baby inside of me. I want a baby. Now, if they have black markets where they do this with other organs, I actually know a sister who, after she had her baby, they gave her a hysterectomy, and she said, I never gave them consent. Never gave them consent. Never. She said, I never gave them consent. And they insisted that she did. She says, I never gave them consent. And that's something that, every now and then she will post about her experience and how how that hurts her. And in my mind, is, I don't think that if they do black market for other things, if people find themselves in tubs filled with ice, such and such, I don't put it past. So there's that too. Sometimes people, they don't want, necessarily that black baby, but if that black womb can grow a baby.
Yeah. And honestly, I was thinking about that in my mind.
Oh, good. I was like, ooh, she gonna cut all of this out.
Human trafficking. We talk about human trafficking.
Exactly.
And we find missing black women.
All the time.
And we find people missing and body organs missing.
Exactly.
From people. So it certainly is something that we would think about or should think about. Or
should think about.
Or even the people, when you say, like she said, I didn't consent. But how many women who are so willing to say, oh yeah, honey, take it, can be told that something is wrong with their womb.
Exactly.
Taken because you're so ready to get rid of it, you don't care. And now this womb that has been taken from you because you think you got
it's useless,
you got whatever, or it's useless, and man, I don't have to have a cycle anymore. And now your uterus is where is it going?
Where is it?
And so I think it is definitely something to consider. If there is nothing medically wrong with you, no cancer, no anything like that, why would you be so willing
to give up an organ?
To give up an organ, a healthy organ.
A healthy organ. And that's a real thing. There are all kinds of complications that come from just the thought of it's not good medical practice to say, I'm going to give up this healthy organ. Well, why do you want to get rid of your gallbladder? Well, why do you want to get rid of your spleen? Because, I'm just thinking, that's not generally how things are done. And it's also important to remember fertility rates, particularly, are dropping currently among European people here, white Americans here. They are not having babies enough to replace themselves. Okay, they're not replacing themselves right now. And so when you start talking about the most affluent people, the people who would have most access and things like that, even though it's a small percentage, the wealthy are the smallest percentage, but you're still talking about people, the same people who wanted to deal with eugenics, who wanted to get rid of brown people all over the world. Black and brown. They just wanted to get rid of melanated people everywhere. I think it's a real thing to think about. And I think it's something, like you mentioned, with Black women and girls. And guess what else is amazing? The whole thought of the uterus, you would think it would be young girls, menopausal women. A woman in menopause that's gone through menopause, her uterus kicks. Let me tell you how amazing a woman's body is. That girl, I was like, wait a minute, what? Her uterus will kick back into gear, just like a young one. Seriously.
Wow.
So you're menopausal, you haven't had a cycle, you haven't had a whatever. One of the first women that did it, I think in Sweden, the mother gave her uterus to her daughter, because most of the time that's how it's been. Someone in the family would donate it. The mother gave the uterus to her daughter. That baby kicked back in, started menstruating and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But we think that the uterus, don't, girl. Go ahead, uterus. Go ahead, womb.
It has never crossed my mind to do any of that. And I remember when I was ready to have my son, I kept thinking about all the women in my family that kept talking about having fibroids. And so then I started thinking, well, if there's a history of fibroids, maybe I'll get fibroids. So let me go ahead and have a baby. And I didn't have fibroids. And then a few years later, I ended up with fibroids. But then I started changing things.
Talk about it.
Like my diet and all of
Yes.
that. My fibroids have not grown. They do not bother me. None of that happened. In fact, I had an ultrasound and they couldn't even hardly find the fibroid.
Akila, it sounds like you talking about change my nutrition, like I can't eat what I want to eat and do what I want to do.
I'm just saying.
How come the same thing happened with me? Like people would say, okay, dairy and this and that, and certain meats and things like that, if you curb this and curb that. And I have seen a change in the amount and clotting caused by fibroids and all those things. A decrease in the amount of blood. It's that work. I think there's something about us as women and all of our effort to, and I say our because of whatever, but there's a part of me still that, anything that's causing us or wanting us to like deny the womanhood part of it. Like, for example, I'm not talking about anybody that wears them Thinks draws, but the Thinks, like, what they are, right? Do you know that?
Mm-mm.
They're the ones, the period draws.
Oh, the period panties. Okay.
The period panties.
The period panties, where you don't have to even know you're bleeding. You don't have to you don't have to change. You don't have to do anything. You just bleed, and it has thing, and it soaks it up. It just soaks it up. I just think that we need to. There's something about forgetting that I'm, doing that I think is working against us, and I hope that we can begin to honor womanhood again, being a woman again.
Absolutely. And then understand the chemicals that
talk about it
in some of these pads, and I'm sure in period panties, because if it's making you to feel like that. And so then what does that do to you? Maybe that helps you to have this adversarial relationship with your womb because you have these chemicals that's next to you that is causing problems for you that maybe you wouldn't have but for that. And let's think about it. With our parents, they didn't have those chemicals in their pads. They actually had cotton. They had real cotton. They
sure
had
did.
rags that they put
they did
down there. So
I had to use rags when I went to my grandmother's house. Tell me about it.
Okay. Had Southern life.
Yes, honey.
Because it seems as if many of the problems that we have seem to have increased over time with all of these wonderful feminine products that have been made for us. And that's the same way even with people, and I know a lot of people like to go out and buy all of these feminine products to make us smell a certain way and all
Mm.
when the reality is you're not even supposed to be putting soap
Mm-hmm.
in certain areas. It's supposed to just be clean water. But we don't know that because we're you know we're trying to smell a certain way. You don't have to stink regardless, you know.
Yep, that's true.
But again, we have this idea, and because we are hiding, and really those sometimes those odors will alert you to something being wrong. But if you're masking it,
Woo!
then how do you then give your womb the proper attention that it needs?
That's right.
Because you don't know anything wrong with you because you're too busy trying to mask something that's warning you. So it, you know, it's just interesting. It's just that we don't have the proper education. You know, we talk about having sex education in school and we talk about all of these things, but what are we really being taught about us and about our womb and about, I mean, it just makes no sense to me.
And I just wanted to say one more thing. When it comes to what are we really being taught, you know, once again, the school, whether it's doing sex ed or not, they're not going to teach us the way historically African women and indigenous women taught their own daughters. We're not going to get that from anywhere else. We have to reclaim that understanding. We have to educate ourselves as moms, even as aunts. I mean, just as women, get that information back so that we can begin to educate ourselves. If we are going based on what the system is telling us, I can tell you what that is. I remember teaching in high school. It is not something that is going to make young girls safer necessarily in this regard.
Wonderful knowledge, wonderful knowledge. This brings us to our challenges, right, Sister Keela? I'm ready. I'm ready to challenge my audience listeners. I'm ready to challenge my sisters. See, see, Dr. Doula, we have this aspect of our show where we like to challenge our sisters, and I'm about to start doing some challenging. Like I always say, first and foremost, accept our own and be ourselves is always key. Number two, we need to get acquainted with our womb. Our womb is not our enemy.
Yes.
That's us. That's our friend. That's our sister. That is us. We need to reconnect with our womb. Y'all better holler at Ketnu Nefer over at A Soulful Touch Wellness. I'm telling you, I have just got acquainted with my womb. I did a womb meditation session with my sister. I want to holler at you, Sister Ketnu in DC. Wait, what's the website for Ketnu? Because I need to send some sisters to it. A Soulful Wellness.
It's a soulfultouch.com.
There you go, soulfultouch.net, right?
A soulfultouch.com.
A soulfultouch.com. Okay, y'all need to check that out because it's imperative that sisters, we need to get acquainted with our womb. We need to talk to our womb. As you said, Dr. Doula, we need to do a womb massage. We need to have a conversation with our womb to figure out what our womb is trying to tell us. What's wrong with our womb? We need to get acquainted.
Yeah.
The next thing we need to do is we need to shut out the influence of the medical field. Stop allowing them to influence our thinking and influence how we treat our bodies. Just because there's this movement to get rid of our uterus, don't just hop on that bandwagon just because it's the new thing, it's a movement. Sit back and think about, do I really have any problems? And if I'm getting rid of my womb, my uterus, just because I want to help a family member have a baby, maybe I should consider having that baby. That's something to consider. So, the last challenge is, let's pass this knowledge down to our young daughters, our young sisters. We have to get them on the right path. We cannot allow them to continue to make the mistakes that we have made and the mistakes that we are making. As we are accepting our own and being ourselves and going back to our ancient practices, we need to steer our young daughters and our young sisters that way as well. As we heal, they heal.
Exactly.
And that are my challenges for today. Any last words, sisters? Keela, you got a last word?
I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Doula.
Oh
Dr.
my
Doula, you
goodness.
got a last word for us, Dr. Doula?
Well, let me take my text. Okay, yes. First of all, thank you again for having me. It's been a pleasure and a wonderful time. And if I could just encourage women with anything, just remember, the whole discussion about wombs and your uterus and your body and all of those things. Nowadays, Western culture says that belongs to a midwife, that belongs to a doula. You don't discuss that, but that is not what happened 50, 60 years ago with our grandmothers and great grandmothers before they integrated us into their system, where we had to assimilate into the way they did things. We had to know for ourselves. And that knowledge that they hold off now as being so far from us is not far from us at all. There are still remnants. And if we reach for it, that information will come back to us and we can begin to regulate ourselves again and to heal ourselves again and save ourselves and recognize how important this womb is, how much of a blessing it is to be a womb man.
Thank you so much for sharing. If someone wanted to reach out to you, how could they contact you? What's your contact information, sis?
drdoula.com. drdoula.com, and you can contact me there and also see the things that I offer to help us reclaim our birthright as women of African descent in this country. So drdoula.com, you can contact me there.
Okay, y'all better contact Dr. Doula. I'm telling you, if you enjoyed our show, contact Dr. Doula. And as always, we want to thank you for sharing a moment, listening to our podcast, and tuning in to Conversations with the Royal Empress. Have a good evening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Conversations with the Royal Empress. Tune in next week for another enlightening conversation. For more information on the Royal Empress, please visit the website royalempress.org. You can also follow the Royal Empress on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Conversations with the Royal Empress is a subsidiary of the Royal Empress organization. All rights reserved.